For those of you who may not know me, I'm Lori Frick. I'm the Child Protective Services Director. It's super nice to see all of you. Please just reminding you to have your cameras on for this Back to Basics and participate. Save your questions for the end and rather than putting them in the chat. It's a little bit too much to manage when you're doing a training and then also having all the questions put in the chat. So if you could hold on to those questions for the end, that would be great. Today we have Derek McComas, who's a service area manager from Des Moines, and Cassie McAllister, who is our senior field liaison for child protection, who are going to just touch base with you a little bit about RFIs, or requests for information. Some of you may not realize that you participate in some of this, but this is just an opportunity to really get a background as to what happens kind of behind the scenes sometimes on some spaces where we have some people asking some questions about how things are moving forward on a case, and they're going to give you kind of the background of all that. So without hesitation, I'm going to hand this off to Derek and Cassie and thank them both for doing this.
Thanks, Lori. As Lori mentioned, I'm Derek McComas. I'm the service area manager here in the Des Moines service area. We thought that talking about RFIs right now would be a timely topic for Back to Basics with legislative session kicking off this week over at the Capitol. We often see an increase of RFIs during legislative session with those legislators being contacted more by their constituents and things like that, and thought this would be a good opportunity to shine a light on RFIs and what all goes on behind the scenes and how you all in the field can interact with that process. As Cassie and I were preparing for this presentation, Cassie shared a time when somebody told her the first time they got an RFI as a worker, they had no idea what it was. If that's you, don't feel bad. RFI just stands for Requests for Information. A very simple explanation is that an RFI is when someone reaches out and asks questions about a case and central office is involved. We were going to try to get a poll in here at this time to see how often folks on this call have or what level of awareness you may have about RFIs. So you see the poll that just popped up. Please take a moment and indicate what your experience with RFIs are. As you do that, I will continue. Commonly, it seems RFIs are thought of only as complaints to central office. And it's true, some of them are, but they also involve other things like helping those reaching out to make connections to leadership teams in the service areas, getting questions answered, connecting relatives to workers for children, and much more. RFI requests do not often come directly to CPWs or SWCMs, but they do involve cases, so your supervisors may seek information from you as part of that process. A high-level overview of an RFI looks like this. The process begins at central office. Cassie is the point of contact for inquiries within our division. Cassie will often gather information together primarily through reviews of information in our systems like CWIS and EDMS, and then sends an email request to SAM secretaries for the appropriate service area to respond. Now I'm going to take a moment here to pause and just express my own personal gratitude, and I know others feel this way for the work that Cassie does. She does a lot of work on the front end before even sending those requests out that saves us in the field a lot of time and effort. So thank you, Cassie, for all the work you do. After the SAM secretary receives that request from Cassie, it's then disseminated from there within the service area, and next steps occur usually kind of per each service area's particular processes. After those steps take place, a response is then sent back to Cassie with the requested information, and she takes it from there. CPWs and SWCM staff work with their supervisors and potentially other members of the leadership team to respond to those RFIs. Next slide, please.
Okay, so I am seeing results from our RFI poll. Looks like 43% of you have worked on one, 33% have heard about RFIs, and 24% have never heard of RFIs. And then that's awesome. I appreciate your participation in that poll. I had requested that be added just to kind of get a feel for what folks' experience were related to that. So thank you for your responses. I am going to talk about where RFIs come from. Basically, it's anywhere. This is a list of the more common ones. I get lots of calls directly that are forwarded to me from the 800 number or from just about anywhere in HHS. That could include the director's office. And sometimes external entities provide my name as someone to contact two individuals. So I get calls directly from that. The Ombudsman's office is a source of inquiries as well. And if those of you out there aren't familiar with that office, they work with individuals when they are concerned about the actions of a public agency in Iowa. And if it's related to CPS, those inquiries come to me. I also get lots of emails forwarded to me that are sent to the director's office, the attorney general's office. I get emails from the Social Work Licensure Board complaints system, and also those that are sent to virtually any email address that somebody might dig out of the HHS website. Speaking of the website, there is a contact us function on the very bottom of that website that folks are directed to fill out kind of a web-based form with an inquiry. Those generate an email and I handle those. We also get inquiries through social media. There is like an HHS Facebook page that people occasionally will send a message related to a CPS case through, and those get sent to me. And we also get inquiries from legislators, which can be state or federal. And Derek mentioned with the start of the legislative session, those tick up. So you may see a few more of those. While we're talking about legislators, what I want to mention is legislators should not be contacting staff directly. We have a legislative liaison. His name is Nick Crawford, and he handles any inquiries from legislators. So if you get direct contact from a legislator, make sure that that person is referred to Nick Crawford, or that an email or voicemail message that you get is sent to Nick Crawford for handling. Sometimes when folks are newly elected, they may not be aware of our agency's process around that. And we make special mention of this because it just did happen recently. So it's important to make sure those things are directed to him. I also want to mention, as part of that, another entity that HHS staff don't talk directly with are members of the media. So if you get a call from a reporter, make sure to forward those folks to our communications division. And Danielle Sample is the person who handles those inquiries. So just get those directed to her. Some of the reasons we get inquiries include complaints, and examples of this: my social worker is not returning my call, my worker's done something unfair or illegal, I have a problem with my family interaction plan, or any other case-specific issues. Sometimes I get inquiries when people legitimately don't understand the process or the structure of HHS and have just general questions. Sometimes issues are more complex, like they're upset or mad, or they're worried about or advocating for a friend or relative. I also know sometimes people are answer shopping and trying to get someone within central office to give some answer opposite of what their worker and supervisor might have given. And I always kind of keep my ears open for that. I also get simple questions like, who's my worker, or who's their supervisor? How do I report child abuse? I have questions on an appeal. They also ask lots of times, how do I request records? And I want to talk a second about records requests. Local area offices are the main place for individuals to get their records. Central office doesn't disseminate records to individuals making requests. The one exception to that is the Child Abuse Registry, and they can provide only reports that are on the registry. So if somebody's calling and saying, I want all my child abuse reports, and there are 5 of them, and it might be a mix of founded, not confirmed, confirmed, family assessments, China assessments, the best place to handle those is the local office. So I think sometimes out there, I figured out workers have directed individuals to central office or to the contact us box for that. And those should be handled by the local office, and you should each have a process in place for that.
All right. As you can see on this chart, RFIs are organized into 5 types. This chart outlines the differences between those responses and the anticipated timeframes for each. Don't worry about committing this to memory. It's just a guide to give you a sense of the process. The top three types on the chart, S, F, and D, are more formal in nature, and a response is given in the form of a signed letter or a letter signed by the HHS Legislative Liaison or Director Harvey. The fourth type, C, has a specific template and requires a phone call, usually by a supervisor directly to that constituent. Cassie uploads information about who called, when the call happened, and brief information about that conversation. And the fifth type is also our most common, and it's I, which stands for informal. Those are the types that usually require some direct outreach from service area staff and then providing a summary of that outreach back to Cassie, who then takes it from there. When a call is needed, time frame for that call is 24 to 48 hours. But please note that the urgency of the situation or other circumstances could result in that time frame being shorter or longer. Each service area might have their own internal process for who reviews responses before they are sent back to Cassie. But responses to Cassie typically do come back from the SAM secretary, though sometimes there are exceptions to this.
So I kind of want to emphasize for CPWs and SWCMs that you're likely going to hear about a request for information through your supervisor. These won't come to you guys directly. So as we kind of highlight that process, I want to point that out. Most of the time, you're going to get questions about a case from your supervisor based on a specific inquiry. So the preceding slide talked about some RFIs that result in letters being sent. Some of you might have noticed if you've had some experience with RFIs in the past that we're doing fewer of these, and that is very intentional because it's recognized that personal contact and conversation is the best way to do business. Communication's really good. It's fair for folks to ask questions and be a part of a conversation where those are answered and discussed. That's why we have a lot more informal type RFIs that are asking for those conversations occur. And even legislators are kind of following that model. They're asking lots of times for an opportunity to sit down with our leadership and ask questions and have a discussion versus that sending of a formal letter. So many RFIs are please call a certain person, send back a brief summary, and it's recognized that when possible, the chain of command in a service area is the best avenue to address concerns because the teams in each service area truly know the families and truly know their dynamics best. When RFIs come in, I make efforts to assist, particularly when there's a case summary or a timeline needed. The purpose behind that is to reduce the legwork that workers and supervisors have to do. You guys have enough on your plates. You don't need additional. So I'm reviewing information in CWIS systems, Jarvis, Fax, CareMatch, EDMS, anything I can get my hands on. So if you guys are uploading information, particularly like on ongoing cases and assessments to your file managers, that's very helpful so I can include those pieces in my review. When I put that historical summary together, I generally send it to the service area and ask that they review it for accuracy and then provide just an update. I don't want you guys to put in a ton of time if it's not needed. Sometimes cases are more complex and require you guys to put more information together, but if we can avoid that, that's my goal. So generally I'm requesting a quick update with a summary of a call if one was requested.
Derek, you're muted.
Cool. Sorry, guys. As I was saying, you may be asking yourself, oh, what do I say if I'm asked to call as part of an RFI? As Cassie mentioned just a bit ago, when outreach is requested, most of the time it's a supervisor or a SWA that's asked to call, and it's the role of the CPW or SWCM to help gather information for that call. But if at any point you are asked to call or make contact to an individual through the RFI process, remember this. It's okay to be transparent with the reason for your calling. It's okay to let them know you're calling in response to their specific outreach or inquiry. Be careful not to come across as critical or angry because of that outreach, and maybe use it as an opportunity for you to remind them that they can call you directly if anything comes up. therefore maybe avoiding the RFI process altogether. The overarching message is HHS works cooperatively with families. We aren't mad because they called, so it's okay to acknowledge that they reached out. If the concern has already been addressed during a conversation prior to the RFI, you may still need to reach out again and readdress the matter with the individual, making sure they don't have any other additional questions. And this is also where it's important to say that you received information from their inquiry and are reaching out as such. If you're not sure what to do through a call, just ask. Your supervisor can assist, and Cassie can always help with any questions. An important reminder about when these calls are happening is that confidentiality still applies. For example, a grandmother reaching out through a legislator would still need a release signed by a parent to obtain information, or for information about that case to be provided to her. Even legislators need an ROI signed by a parent in order to obtain information from HHS. Sometimes general information about how HHS does business does still help to answer questions for individuals who don't have access to the confidential information.
Okay, so this is kind of to explain the purpose of an RFI. And the impact of these go just beyond gathering information. So ultimately, an RFI is a prompt for communication, but it can also prompt review and consultation needs. RFIs start because somebody, like a family member or someone advocating for a family, has reached out related to some concern or question. Communication related to that is a very natural response. Depending on the situation or the other factors impacting a case, could be complexity, engagement, or something else, it might be time to do some clinical consultation to review the status. We know even the very best worker on their very best day can't think of everything, and clinical consultation is a great part of social work practice. We have the opportunity to redirect folks who are making inquiry outside of the team in the service area back to that leadership structure. It helps us again reinforce the work of the team that is serving them locally. It also reinforces the chain of command within a service area. So it builds on that concept that those working directly know them best. RFIs also serve to document questions asked and responses given. The most frequent use of information gathered from an RFI is to inform a response to a legislator, the ombudsman's office, or the director's office. And sometimes information that's needed later can inform future inquiries. RFIs also do something really cool, and that's affirm great work done. When I review cases, I regularly see shining examples of extraordinary efforts made to ensure child safety or exceptional engagement with families around the change process. They can provide HHS with information to talk through a family's situation with external entities who may be less aware of how our agency functions.
All right, up until this point, we've talked a lot about what RFIs are and the process behind them. This slide talks a little bit about what RFIs are not. An RFI does not mean that someone is in trouble. The assignment in an RFI on one of your cases does not mean that you did something wrong. In fact, most times information gathered for RFI really affirms the work the field is doing. It's also not intended to mean that a family is in trouble. Remember, we don't print out RFI information or attach it to a court report. It also doesn't mean that Big Brother is watching or meddling. There's steady awareness that CPWs and SWCMs in the service areas do great work, but the very nature of child welfare sometimes means conflict can occur or questions can arise. As you are all very aware, HHS doesn't always tend to meet families on their best day, and sometimes the decisions made to protect children result in action with which families and parents are not in agreement. RFIs are also not intended to criticize the work of service areas. It doesn't always feel good to have somebody review your work, but in child welfare, we are always looking at ways to make our practice better, and listening to feedback is an important piece of that. The intent is to gather information, streamline communication, and serve families as best we can in line with the laws of Iowa.
So we've already hit a little bit on this, but this talks about what happens to the information gathered. The director's office may be reviewing it. That could include members of the compliance team, can be reviewed by the Family Wellbeing and Protection Leadership Team or the legislative liaisons for conversations with or letters to legislators. It's used to respond to inquiries for the governor's or the ombudsman's office, and it's maintained as history in the event future inquiries come. So we've already got one response. We're not going to recreate the wheel because we've already got information from a former response.
And finally, we'll talk about some good tips and tricks for RFIs. When you're responding to an RFI, remember, more isn't always more. Your time is valuable and there's always a lot on your plate. So it's important that you don't do extra work that's not needed. As we've talked about a couple times throughout this presentation, Cassie does a great job of compiling information that already exists within our systems for history on those cases, and may only ask that a quick review is done and that there's an update provided on current status. Here's a word of caution. Be careful what you put in writing. Keep it professional. Written information can be pulled for discovery by various court processes, subpoenas, the press, and the ombudsman. A little thing that I like to think about when I'm putting things in writing is, if you don't want what you're writing put in the newspaper on the front page of the Register, don't put it in an email. If information is requested, please provide it as soon as you're able. Don't wait for a deadline if you don't have to. With calls, if it's requested that you call someone, please try to call as soon as you can work it in, because you might not be able to connect with that individual at the last minute. It's always important to communicate. If someone asks you who your supervisor is, tell them. It's okay to provide that information, as we're all working together to serve kids and families. Also a good reminder to make sure that you are giving out those chain of command letters on all your cases so that folks do know who they can reach out to and who they can escalate concerns to throughout the chain of command within your service areas. Remember to return calls when voicemails are left. Even if you can't disclose information to a caller due to confidentiality, returning calls to listen and let them know you can't share that can sometimes prevent the next level of a call, or even prevent an RFI from happening in the first place. If you anticipate a complaint may be coming to central office, Cassie always loves getting a heads up ahead of time, so please feel free to reach out and let her know. And remember, if there's ever any questions about what's needed, it's always okay to ask. And with that, we can move on to questions from the field.
And while we wait patiently, I'm going to just reiterate a couple of quick things. One is, if you don't know what the chain of command letter is, please ask your supervisor and find out. That is an absolute expectation from me, that we are using those chain of command letters. And here's the why. As Cassie and Derek spoke this morning, most of the situations in where someone is upset, most of those are going to be able to be managed within your local service areas, whether it's you as a worker, if it's your supervisor, your SWA, your SAM. Most of those complaints are able to be managed there. And it really does save, letters or concerns going straight to like the governor's office or the director. So please make sure you're using those. We have found those to be super helpful. The other thing that I will say, they talked about emails and making sure that you're cautious about just being respectful and professional in your emails. Absolutely correct. And don't forget that in the state of Iowa, you can be recorded at any time and not know it. They don't have to tell you. So be thoughtful about that too as you practice. I'm sharing that from a fairly recent experience for myself, where I was recorded in a conversation. So just a reminder that it's good to be sure that you are thoughtful of all those things as you move forward. So Anita just put in the chat that constituent complaints are stressful. Yep, I hear you, Anita.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. And I want you to know that what we understand as we are, and Cassie in particular is working through those complaints, is that this system that we work in is really complicated. Things aren't just always black and white. families want things to be black and white sometimes, and it just isn't the way that it is. And Cassie does an absolute fantastic job of gathering information and truly understanding kind of all the things that are going into decision making. And I'm going to tell you, by and large, our staff aren't making the wrong decisions. I mean, once in a while, somebody will accidentally say something that wasn't the right thing to say, or maybe do something that wasn't the right thing to do. But people aren't doing this kind of thing intentionally, and so it's easily resolved when that happens. So I just want to share that I have such a unbelievable respect for all of you and all the work you guys do every single day. And I know that it's hard. And so if there's things that myself and the service area managers or Cassie or whomever can do to make things easier for all of you, we certainly are trying to do that. So I'll just say this, keep up the great work. I mean, it's really great and difficult work that you guys do out there every day.